We want to begin with the big changes inside the Chinese leadership. Last hour, I started a conversation with former U.S. Ambassador to China, John Huntsman. Here's more of our exclusive interview.
Well, there are always challenges inherent in the changes of people, particularly those who have been in and they've set the mark and created good relations on the other side, and they've engaged in a good on-run dialogue. We need more of those good on-run dialogues with real results. But as Xi Jinping said recently, he said the changing of the guard is a little bit like a relay race. He said, the baton is passed, and to some extent you keep going forward. Of course, you change some things here and there, but by and large you keep running the race. And so it is with the U.S.-China relationship. For 40 plus years, we've had a pretty consistent run, economically, security-wise, people to people, the cultural stuff. So that all must continue. I mean, we've got a good rhythm down as it relates to the fundamentals of the U.S.-China relationship, but it's growing so large. And now with both of us on the world stage, the two largest economies of the world, rising military in China, the stakes are so much higher than they were before. The days were very innocent, even 10 years ago, where the expectations weren't nearly what they are today. You could manage the relationship without a whole lot of blowback. Today you've got to manage the relationship, but you've got to manage it in ways that really do address global hotspots and global problems, because nobody else can. So because of that, the opening that is presented by the changing of the guard will allow us to review where we've been in a relationship that's changing so quickly, and to recalibrate as it relates to the future. That's always an important opening, and it should not be missed.
You're talking about real results. I think there's an expectation level now with the new leadership in China that's very high. You were talking about managing expectations, and as you and I had a chance to talk before this interview, changing any government, whether it's the United States, France, Britain, China, it's really kind of like turning an aircraft carrier. It's very slow, not easy. There is this expectation level with the new leadership. How do they tamper that down and say, hey, the change is coming, it may not be overnight, it might be gradual? How do they manage that?
Well, I think in Beijing, like here in Washington, you're given a so-called honeymoon period. So turning the aircraft carriers, you say, around, which is an apt analogy, it's a very difficult thing to do. But if you don't start making the turn, and a good percentage of the turn in the first 6 months to a year, you never turn it around in the 4 or 5 years that follow. You've got an opening, a honeymoon period, as they call it here in the West, and you've got to define where you're going, what your goals and objectives are, and bring together the interest groups that you need in order to deliver on those promises, and begin to work straight away. And from what I've seen in Beijing, Xi Jinping, now that he's consolidated his power with the party and with the military and as head of state that we just learned about, not surprisingly this week, he now will probably spend the next few months tightening the bolts, having consolidated his power, and then define his objectives for the next few years before the 19th Party Congress. He has an opening, and that will be this year, and then it will close a little bit. So my sense is that he will define in the next few months what his key objectives will be as a leader. And that needs to happen here in the United States as well, particularly as it relates to the U.S.-China relationship, because we have a very rare opening. The cycles of politics on both sides are in sync. We've had an election. There's a new leader in China. We don't have elections to worry about for a little while. The externalities have been minimized, in other words, and we should be able to move forward with a strategy that speaks to our respective needs.
One final question. A year from now, what would be a successful turn of the aircraft carrier in your estimation? I mean, where should China be a year from now?
I think if China begins to define its specific steps toward rule of law. Now, I've heard those words uttered by Xi Jinping in recent weeks more than ever before. What does that mean? What are the implications for a real civil society? If a year from now we understood that journey toward expanding civil society and undergirding it with rule of law, I think that would be a big deal. If the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, We're told in the next year that you can't write the rules any longer for the game of trade and investment, as we've seen for the last better part of 10 years. That would be a huge deliverable in the next year. We're talking about indigenous innovation, procurement practices, national treatment, lack of transparency. If at least the early stages of SOE change and reform could be seen in the next 12 months, that would be a very, very big deal.
Ambassador Huntsman, it's always a delight. Thanks so much for your insights.
Great to be with you. Thank you.